The village lay nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a place where the rhythm of life was dictated by the cycles of the sun and the whispered wisdom of generations. It was remote, isolated from the bustle of nearby towns, and yet rich in tradition, where every corner, every path, and every ritual held meaning. Among these practices, none were as mysterious or as feared as the protective rites performed to guard the village's boundaries. Among them, the fields stretching beyond the central homes were considered both sacred and perilous, lined with scarecrows that were more than mere straw effigies. They were guardians, imbued with the village's beliefs, designed to repel malevolent spirits and keep the darkness at bay. Yet, despite their purpose, villagers spoke of the fields in hushed tones after sunset, as if even the wind could carry whispers of danger to those who dared linger. At the heart of the village lived a young girl whose presence was quietly remarkable. Known for her boundless curiosity and innate bravery, she often wandered the edges of the village, listening to elders' tales, observing the flight of birds, and noting how the wind danced through the tall grass. Her eyes held a sharp intelligence, one that could notice details others overlooked, and her demeanor blended gentleness with a daring spark. Villagers admired her in secret, though they also warned her of the dangers that lurked beyond familiar paths. Even from a young age, she exhibited a courage that made her different, a courage that would soon be tested by forces both natural and supernatural. The fields beyond the village were the subject of countless stories and warnings. Children were told to return before dusk, lest they anger spirits that wandered among the scarecrows. Elders spoke of figures moving silently through the stalks, invisible to most eyes but vigilant and watchful, ensuring the balance between protection and punishment. The scarecrows themselves were objects of fascination and fear, fashioned from tattered clothes and twisted branches, their hollow eyes staring blankly yet commanding attention. At night, the wind could make them sway in unsettling ways, and shadows cast by moonlight could transform their forms into shapes of menace. Even the bravest villagers avoided the fields after sunset, leaving them to the whispers of the wind and the gaze of the guardians who were never truly still. The ominous atmosphere surrounding the fields was heightened by the village's collective belief in the power of the scarecrows. Many claimed they had seen movement among them at night, subtle shifts that suggested intelligence or life. Others swore that those who dared disrespect the fields or its guardians faced misfortune, illness, or strange occurrences. Stories passed down through generations spoke of travelers who had wandered too close, only to return with tales of eerie voices, shadows that followed, or sudden chills that had no earthly source. While some villagers dismissed these tales as superstition, the majority treated them with reverent caution, reinforcing the field's role as both protector and enforcer of unseen laws. As dusk approached, painting the horizon with shades of amber and purple, the girl gazed toward the fields, her curiosity pulling her closer even as an unspoken warning lingered in her mind. She understood the stories, felt the weight of caution, and yet sensed something that others did not, a call perhaps to witness the secrets hidden among the scarecrows. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of earth and the faint rustle of the guardian's tattered clothing. In that moment, the boundary between fear and fascination blurred. The village, the girl, and the field coexisted in a delicate tension, each aware of the other, each poised on the brink of an event that would test courage, reveal truths, and awaken a story that would be told for generations. The morning air was thick with tension as the village gathered near the edge of the ominous fields. Rumors had spread for days about the girl's supposed misstep. Though it was unclear whether she had acted out of curiosity or defiance, the elders and influential villagers had deemed it necessary to send her into the field of scarecrows. Some whispered it was a punishment for questioning tradition, while others claimed it was a test of her courage and spirit. Regardless of the reasoning, the decision had been made, and the girl now faced an ordeal that would either mark her for greatness or humiliate her in front of the entire community. The elders, draped in ceremonial robes and holding staffs carved with symbols of authority, stood as judges and overseers. Their eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on her with a mix of scrutiny and expectation. She could feel the weight of their collective gaze, their judgment hanging over her like the clouds that threatened rain. Her family members, some supportive and others complicit in the elders' decision, formed a circle nearby. Her mother, long deceased, had left only stories of resilience and bravery, and her stepmother, if she were present, watched with thinly veiled disdain. A few villagers who were rivals in spirit or jealous of her curiosity exchanged uneasy glances, eager to see the girl falter. Their motivations varied. Some feared that her intelligence and courage might overshadow them, others wanted to see the traditions strictly enforced. All of them, however, understood that the field at night was not just a place of superstition. It was a crucible designed to reveal the heart and strength of anyone who dared enter it. For the girl, the challenge was more than physical. It was a confrontation with fear, expectation, and the unknown forces that lingered among the scarecrows. As she approached the edge of the field, the girl felt a shiver run through her spine. The scarecrows swayed faintly in the breeze, their hollow eyes seeming to watch her every move. Despite her fear, she drew in a deep breath and squared her shoulders, reminding herself of the lessons her mother had taught her. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. She checked the simple tools or charms she had brought with her, small tokens of protection and guidance, though she knew their power was as much symbolic as practical. Her fingers brushed the worn edges of a small pendant, her silent anchor in a moment where both danger and tradition loomed large. The stakes could not have been clearer. If she failed, she risked public humiliation, the loss of her reputation, and the whispers of fear and superstition might cling to her name forever. The villagers' eyes were upon her, each heartbeat amplified by the collective tension of expectation. Some hoped she would succeed, others anticipated her failure, and a few feared what might happen if she proved herself beyond measure. It was not merely a test of courage but a test of identity, of her place within the intricate web of village beliefs and social hierarchy. Every step she took toward the first line of scarecrows was measured, deliberate, and filled with the silent defiance of one who would not be easily broken. With the sun dipping toward the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the field, she paused briefly, surveying the rows of guardians that awaited her. The wind carried the rustle of tattered clothing, the faint creak of wooden joints, and the whisper of ancient superstitions. In that instant, the girl understood the enormity of the task ahead. She was to enter a space that had long been feared, confront what others dared not approach, and emerge with her courage intact. The field of scarecrows was not just a place, it was a test, a challenge, and a crucible, and the girl's resolve would determine whether she remained a mere observer of tradition or became its living testament. As the girl stepped into the field, dusk painted the horizon in deep shades of orange and violet, casting long flickering shadows that stretched across the tall stalks of crops. The scarecrows loomed ahead, each uniquely constructed with tattered clothing and twisted branches, their hollow eyes staring blankly yet seeming to follow her every movement. Some wore hats that flopped awkwardly in the wind, others had scarves that whipped around like serpents, lending an almost lifelike quality to the figures. The air carried the faint scent of dry earth and decaying leaves, mingling with the whispers of the wind that threaded through the field, creating an unsettling symphony of rustling fabric and creaking wood. Every step she took caused a small crunch, and the sound seemed disproportionately loud in the quieting evening, echoing as if the field itself were aware of her presence. Her heartbeat quickened, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. She had been told stories of the field's mystical properties, of the spirits that could inhabit the scarecrows and of travelers who had never returned after nightfall. Yet even with the weight of superstition pressing against her, her curiosity urged her forward. She could not help but study each scarecrow in detail, noting the way some leaned slightly as though bowing, while others stood rigidly, almost as if waiting. The tension was palpable, the boundary between the ordinary and the supernatural blurred by the dimming light and the eerie stillness of the field. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground, twisting and shifting with the movement of the wind, sometimes taking forms that made her gasp, only to realize moments later that they were mere illusions created by the setting sun. Strange noises filled the air, subtle yet distinct. The snap of a twig, the whisper of fabric against wood, the soft rustle of something moving unseen. Each sound sharpened her senses, forcing her to measure every breath and every step carefully. Her mind raced, imagining possibilities both terrifying and thrilling. Despite the fear, a spark of determination glimmered within her. She had faced challenges before, though none as peculiar or daunting as this field of guardians. Each scarecrow represented not just a physical obstacle, but a test of her courage and presence of mind. Curiosity, mingled with a growing sense of resolve, drove her further into the field. She wondered what secrets these figures might conceal, whether there were forces at play beyond her understanding, and how she might navigate the night without faltering. With every step, the wind tugged at her hair and clothing, as if the field itself were testing her persistence, yet she pressed on. Fear was present, yes, but it was tempered by a quiet determination. She was here to confront the unknown, to move through the field where others dared not tread, and to discover what lay hidden among the silent, swaying guardians. In that liminal space between day and night, between superstition and reality, The girl's courage began to solidify, readying her for the trials that the night had yet to reveal. As the girl ventured deeper into the field, she began to notice subtle movements among the scarecrows. At first it was barely perceptible, a tilt of a head here, a shift of a branch there, but gradually the changes became more pronounced. One scarecrow, which had seemed firmly planted, leaned slightly toward her, as if acknowledging her presence. Another seemed to step aside, creating a narrow path as though silently guiding her through the labyrinth of guardians. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and awe. These were not ordinary scarecrows. There was intelligence behind their movements, an awareness that defied the explanations of ordinary logic. The wind carried their rustling clothes in a way that sounded almost like murmured voices, soft and insistent, urging her forward while warning her of unseen dangers. Her instincts screamed that something supernatural was at work. The stories she had heard, whispered by elders and mothers alike, were not merely tales meant to frighten children. The field itself seemed alive, its guardians animated by some unseen force that responded to her presence. Shadows stretched unnaturally, intertwining with the scarecrows, creating shapes that shifted with an eerie fluidity. Every step she took was met with subtle, calculated reactions from the figures around her. Yet despite the fear these signs invoked, she felt a strange reassurance as well. The field, while ominous, seemed to recognize her courage, testing her without the intent to harm. Those who had doubted her abilities, whispered about her potential failures, or plotted to see her humiliated would have been forced to reconsider had they witnessed this scene. Even from afar, the villagers began to sense that she was not simply navigating the field. She was engaging with it in a way that required insight, bravery, and integrity. The scarecrow's movements seemed almost to mirror her emotions, amplifying her determination and reflecting her calm focus. It became clear that the field was not an instrument of punishment alone. It was a crucible designed to measure the strength of spirit and clarity of mind. With every step, the girl's confidence grew. She began to understand that courage and integrity were far greater than malice or superstition. The fear that had gripped her at the edge of the field gradually transformed into respect for the hidden intelligence of the guardians. She walked steadily, aware that the path before her was both literal and symbolic. Each careful movement a demonstration of her inner fortitude, each silent observation a proof of her wisdom. The whispers of doubt that had surrounded her in the village now seemed hollow, replaced by the realization that her bravery was undeniable and her instincts true. By the time the moon had risen higher in the sky, casting silvery light across the field, the girl had become more than a visitor. She had become a participant in a living ritual, acknowledged by forces beyond ordinary understanding. The scarecrow's subtle responsiveness confirmed her intuition. This night would mark a turning point, not only in her personal journey but also in the eyes of the community. She had faced fear, recognized the extraordinary, and acted with wisdom and courage, solidifying the villagers' respect for her and beginning the transformation of the field from a place of dread into a realm of admiration and legend. As night descended, the field transformed into a realm of shadows and whispers, the once familiar rows of scarecrows now imposing and enigmatic in the dim moonlight. The girl took a deep breath, feeling the cool air brush against her skin, carrying with it the scent of earth, straw, and the faint decay of autumn leaves. Every step she took was deliberate, careful, yet confident. Her heart pounded with anticipation, and her mind buzzed with the awareness that she was stepping into a space steeped in superstition, one that had tested countless villagers before her. The wind carried an eerie symphony of creaks, rustles, and subtle whispers, as though the scarecrows themselves were alive, watching her every movement, gauging her courage. Navigating the field was no simple matter. Each scarecrow seemed to occupy its own rhythm, swaying in subtle patterns that made it difficult to predict their movements. Some appeared rigid and unmoving, yet as she approached, their shadows stretched, twisted, and seemed to lean subtly toward her path, as if inviting or warning her. The girl observed these interactions carefully, noting the nuances in the way each figure responded to her presence. One particularly large scarecrow, its tattered cloak flapping violently in the wind, tilted slightly as she passed, casting a long shadow that intertwined with hers. Another, smaller and hunched, seemed to shift aside, clearing a narrow path through the stalks. Each movement, though minute, required her full attention, sharpening her senses and testing her resolve. Strange occurrences punctuated the night. The wind would suddenly shift, carrying a faint whisper that sounded like distant laughter or murmured encouragement. Shadows moved where there was no light source to explain them, and the rustling of fabric sometimes seemed synchronized with the beat of her own heartbeat. The girl's instincts told her to remain calm, to move deliberately and with awareness, trusting that the field was both a test and a guide. The Scarecrows, while unnerving, were also strangely protective, their subtle shifts creating paths and barriers that she learned to anticipate. Each encounter with a moving figure strengthened her resolve, reinforcing that courage was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Throughout the vigil, the contrast between the villagers' expectations and her inner strength became apparent. Rumors had flown before nightfall, predicting that she would falter, panic, or flee. Many who had watched from a distance expected fear to dominate, and yet she moved through the field with quiet composure. The very objects that others had feared became allies in her journey, reflecting the balance between respect for tradition and the confidence to act with wisdom. Her calm focus allowed her to respond to unexpected shifts, subtle movements, and eerie noises with measured clarity, transforming what could have been terror into a dance of awareness and precision. Interactions with the Scarecrows deepened as the night progressed. Some leaned slightly as if bowing in recognition, others swayed in rhythmic patterns, their shadows stretching and intertwining with hers. She reached out a tentative hand toward one, feeling the coarse straw and worn fabric beneath her fingers, sensing a silent acknowledgement of her presence. With each step, the field seemed to respond in kind, guiding her through narrow spaces, alerting her to uneven ground, and even shielding her from hidden obstacles. The boundary between fear and mastery blurred as she learned to move in harmony with the guardians, understanding that courage was not about conquering the unknown but moving with it. By the time the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, she had traversed a significant portion of the field, her senses attuned to every rustle, shift, and whisper. The vigil had tested not only her physical endurance but her mental acuity and emotional steadiness. The villagers who had once doubted her were silent witnesses to her unwavering determination. The girl's journey through the night established her not merely as a participant in the ritual, but as a figure of remarkable bravery and insight, demonstrating that inner strength could turn fear into mastery and superstition into awe. As the night deepened, the field grew colder, and the wind carried a sharper edge, rustling the remaining scarecrows and bending the stalks into uneasy shapes. The girl paused for a moment, sensing a shift in the rhythm of the field. Something was not as it should be. Her eyes scanned the rows of guardians, noting their usual positions, yet one spot stood empty. A scarecrow that had been firmly planted near the center of the field earlier was gone, leaving a gap that seemed almost unnatural against the patterned lines of the others. Her breath caught in her throat, and a shiver ran down her spine. The disappearance was inexplicable, she had watched carefully, and there had been no movement when she passed that way only moments ago. Her heart raced as she moved cautiously toward the empty space. Every step was deliberate, yet tension coiled within her like a living thing. She noticed subtle signs that suggested something extraordinary had occurred. The ground where the scarecrow had stood bore faint impressions, as if the figure had lifted itself with purpose. Small leaves and straw trailed away in a pattern that seemed intentional, as though someone, or something, had walked through the field, careful not to disturb more than necessary. The girl's mind raced, considering possibilities. Could the scarecrow have fallen? Was it the work of mischief-making villagers? Or had the field itself, guided by some unseen force, shifted the figure in response to her courage and presence? As she investigated further, the air around her seemed charged with a quiet energy. The remaining scarecrows appeared to lean subtly toward the empty spot, as if acknowledging the absence, yet remaining still and vigilant. Shadows moved unnaturally in the moonlight, flickering across the stalks in a pattern that suggested awareness, almost like silent observers commenting on the event. She felt a curious mixture of fear and exhilaration. Something profound was happening, something that went beyond superstition and entered the realm of the extraordinary. The field was alive, in a way that tested her perception and understanding. It was teaching her, guiding her, and perhaps even rewarding the courage she had shown during the vigil. Her instincts sharpened, and she began to sense that the missing scarecrow was connected to her in some way. Perhaps it was the field's acknowledgement of her bravery, or perhaps it was her own emerging abilities subtly influencing the guardians around her. The thought filled her with awe and a little disbelief. Could she, through courage and focus, have caused the change herself? Was the field responding to her will, or was some hidden force within the scarecrows at play? Each possibility thrilled her while keeping her cautious, reminding her that she must continue moving with care and awareness. The tension in the field heightened as she explored, feeling every snap of twigs beneath her feet, every gust of wind brushing against her. The missing scarecrow seemed almost sentient, its absence leaving a silent question that pressed on her mind. What power had been at work and what did it mean for her future? Every shadow, every whisper of fabric, every movement of the remaining guardians seemed charged with significance, hinting at a story she was only beginning to understand. The field, once a place of fear and superstition, now felt like a living teacher, revealing lessons about courage, intuition, and the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. By the early hours of morning, she realized the full gravity of what had occurred. The missing Scarecrow had transformed the field from a site of dread into a stage for her own awakening. She stood in the moonlight, the wind still whispering through the stalks, feeling a newfound sense of power and understanding. The villagers, who had doubted her abilities, would soon bear witness to something remarkable. She had faced the unknown, embraced the mysterious, and emerged not only unscathed but strengthened, her courage intertwined with the living magic of the Scarecrows. The missing figure was more than a mere absence. It was a symbol of her connection to forces beyond ordinary comprehension, a sign that her journey had only just begun. By the time dawn's first light began to creep over the horizon, the village had already gathered near the edge of the field, drawn by rumors of the missing Scarecrow. Whispers and murmurs spread quickly, each voice carrying a mix of fear, suspicion, and curiosity. The villagers had long believed the field to be a domain of spirits and unseen forces, and now that one of their guardians had vanished, anxiety gripped the community. Parents pulled their children closer, elders exchanged worried glances, and some of the younger villagers murmured prayers or invoked charms for protection. The once dreaded field now held even greater significance, for the missing Scarecrow suggested that the balance between the ordinary and the supernatural had shifted. Among the gathered crowd were those who had doubted her courage, the rivals who had hoped she would falter, and the elders who upheld the traditions she had tested. Their faces were drawn tight with concern and, in some cases, anger. Some accused her openly, claiming that her presence had disturbed sacred rituals or offended unseen powers. A few whispered that perhaps she had somehow stolen or hidden the Scarecrow, bending the rules to prove herself. Fear of consequences and the weight of superstition magnified their reactions, creating a tense atmosphere in which any misstep could escalate into blame and punishment. Despite the tension, the girl remained calm, her composure unwavering even as suspicion and doubt swirled around her. She understood that panic would only feed the villagers' fears, and she also knew that her courage and integrity were her greatest allies. Her eyes, bright and steady, scanned the crowd, reading their reactions, sensing their anxieties, and identifying the threads of jealousy, malice, and fear that had fueled their doubts. She took a deliberate step forward and began to speak, her voice quiet yet firm, explaining what she had observed and experienced during the vigil. Her words were precise, revealing subtle clues about the Scarecrow's movements and hinting at the unusual occurrences she had witnessed without directly challenging the villagers' beliefs. As she spoke, the crowd's initial hostility began to shift. Some villagers leaned forward, straining to understand her account, while others began to murmur in recognition, recalling moments during the vigil that aligned with her story. The girl's calm demeanor and clear recollection of events demonstrated a mastery over fear that few could ignore. Her explanation, though cautious and measured, revealed the truth. The missing Scarecrow had not vanished through mischief, negligence, or malice, but through forces beyond ordinary understanding, forces that she had encountered and navigated with courage. By the time she finished, the atmosphere had changed significantly. Fear and suspicion were replaced with awe and respect, though lingering questions remained. Her rivals, once confident in their ability to intimidate or belittle her, now faced the undeniable reality that her courage and wisdom had guided her through an ordeal that had tested both body and spirit. The elders, too, were compelled to reconsider their assumptions, acknowledging, at least silently, that the girl had earned a place of honor and recognition in the community. In that moment, she had not only survived the field but had begun to reshape the villagers' understanding of bravery, integrity, and the mysteries that dwelled among the Scarecrows. As the sun rose higher, casting a golden hue over the field, the villagers' attention remained fixed on the girl. The night had passed, leaving traces of tension and wonder, but no one yet fully understood what had transpired among the Scarecrows. Slowly, she began to demonstrate the events of the vigil, moving with deliberate precision through the familiar rows where the Scarecrows still stood like silent sentinels. Her gestures were subtle at first, a gentle touch here, a quiet step there, and yet the figures responded almost immediately, tilting or swaying as if acknowledging her presence. The villagers gasped, their eyes widening in disbelief as they realized that the girl's connection to the Scarecrows was no longer ordinary, it was extraordinary. Her courage had been more than physical endurance. She had navigated the field not through fear, but through careful observation, intuition, and a growing awareness of the subtle energies that animated the Scarecrows. Some seemed to act with a life of their own, protecting her from hidden dangers or guiding her along paths that might have been treacherous in darkness. It became clear to the onlookers that the missing Scarecrow had not simply vanished. It had followed her lead, moved with intention, or perhaps even been influenced by her emerging abilities. The girl's actions revealed a unique mastery, a silent dialogue between her and the guardians of the field, a demonstration that courage, focus, and respect for the unseen could unlock hidden potential. Whispers of awe spread quickly through the villagers. "She is no ordinary girl," murmured one elder, his voice tinged with both fear and admiration. "The field itself obeys her." Others exchanged glances, their previous doubts and rivalries now overshadowed by the realization that they were witnessing something beyond mere mortal skill. Some began to question their long-held superstitions and strict adherence to rituals, seeing in her actions a living proof that bravery and wisdom could triumph over fear and oppression. Even those who had hoped to see her fail could not deny the evidence before them. The girl had faced the unknown, navigated danger, and emerged with the respect of the very forces that had inspired terror in the village for generations. As the revelation deepened, the girl moved with increasing confidence, demonstrating how the Scarecrows had shifted in response to her presence. She retraced her steps from the vigil, pointing out subtle shifts in posture, slight tilts, and minor movements that had gone unnoticed at first. Each action seemed to have been orchestrated by some combination of her courage and the latent energy of the field itself. The villagers observed closely, marveling at the harmony between the girl and the guardians, a balance that spoke not only to supernatural ability but to the refinement of her instincts, her intelligence, and her unwavering composure. For those who had doubted or sought to undermine her, the moment was humbling. The girl's bravery, combined with her newly revealed mystical connection, left no room for criticism or ridicule. The Scarecrows, once symbols of fear and compliance, had become her allies, reflecting the power of courage and integrity in the face of superstition. The field, which had long been a place of dread, now stood as a testament to her ability to transform fear into mastery. Villagers began to bow their heads in respect, mothers whispered her name to their children, and the rivals who had plotted against her retreated, forced to acknowledge that her abilities surpassed expectations and ordinary understanding. By mid-morning, the suspense had fully resolved. The girl had not only survived the night but had actively demonstrated a command over circumstances that others had deemed impossible. Her courage, intelligence, and intuition had forged a connection with the Scarecrows that would forever alter the villagers' perception of the field. Where fear and superstition had once reigned, awe and respect now prevailed. The girl stood in the center of the field, her eyes calm and steady, a living embodiment of courage and the extraordinary, recognized by all as someone whose presence commanded reverence and admiration. By the time the sun climbed fully into the sky, the village was abuzz with conversations that carried a new tone, one of reflection, awe, and cautious optimism. The events of the night had left an indelible mark on the community. Where fear and superstition had once dominated their understanding of the field, a subtle yet profound transformation had begun. The villagers, previously hesitant to even approach the scarecrow-laden expanse after dusk, now spoke of it with curiosity and reverence, recognizing that it was not merely a place of dread, but a space where courage, intelligence, and integrity could triumph over fear. The girl's actions had illuminated a truth that the elders had long overlooked, that strength of spirit could command respect even from forces long considered mystical or untouchable. Mothers, who once hurried their children past the field at night, now spoke quietly of the girl's bravery, using her example to teach lessons about courage and self-respect. Fathers and laborers, who had once avoided the area, began to inspect the Scarecrows with fresh eyes, noting the subtle movements they had previously dismissed as wind-blown accidents. Children gathered at the edge of the field, whispering in excitement about the girl who had walked among the guardians and emerged unscathed, her presence transforming fear into admiration. The entire village seemed to vibrate with a newfound understanding. Courage was not merely an abstract quality, but a tangible force that could shape outcomes, influence the unknown, and inspire respect in both humans and the supernatural alike. The elders, who had for generations maintained strict control over rituals, superstitions, and the community's understanding of mystical forces, were forced to confront the limitations of their authority. They had relied on fear as a means of maintaining order, warning villagers of consequences for stepping outside traditional norms. Yet the girl's vigil had shown that fear alone was insufficient to command the extraordinary. Observing her calm composure, her ability to navigate danger with intelligence and insight, and her mystical connection to the Scarecrows, the elders began to recognize that wisdom and bravery could achieve far more than intimidation ever could. They started discussing adjustments to traditions, contemplating ways to honor courage rather than punish it, and to teach respect for both people and the unseen forces of the field. Even the villagers who had once doubted or envied her could no longer deny the truth. Rivals whispered among themselves, realizing that malice and skepticism had yielded nothing against her quiet determination and innate wisdom. Fear of punishment or mystical retribution faded, replaced by admiration for her resilience and intelligence. Those who had plotted against her now witnessed firsthand that courage was more powerful than fear, integrity more commanding than superstition, and wisdom more enduring than rigid adherence to outdated practices. The missing Scarecrow, now a symbol of her triumph, stood as a testament to what could be achieved when fear was met with composure, and uncertainty met with insight. By midday, the shift in village beliefs was unmistakable. Paths through the field, once avoided at all costs, were now approached with reverence and curiosity. Discussions of superstition and ritual began to include the importance of courage, wisdom, and moral integrity. Stories of the girls' vigil spread, and with them, the understanding that true strength lay not in invoking fear, but in demonstrating bravery and respect. The girl's actions had not only transformed her own destiny but had also altered the collective consciousness of her community, leaving a legacy of insight that would influence generations to come. By the afternoon, the atmosphere in the village had shifted entirely. Where fear and suspicion had once ruled, respect and admiration now prevailed, and the girl who had ventured into the field of Scarecrows was celebrated as a figure of courage and insight. Villagers gathered around her, offering words of praise and gratitude for the way she had navigated a challenge that none of them could have faced alone. Her calm composure, clear thinking, and unshakable courage had transformed a place of dread into a sight of wonder, and her actions inspired a profound sense of awe throughout the community. Mothers whispered to their daughters about the girl's bravery, elders nodded in recognition, and even rivals who had hoped to see her fail could not hide their acknowledgement of her extraordinary abilities. Her story quickly became part of the village's teachings, a living example of the power of courage, wisdom, and integrity. At communal gatherings and around fires at night, parents recounted the events of the vigil, emphasizing the lessons learned from her actions. Children listened with wide eyes, imagining the movements of the Scarecrows and the mysterious energy of the field, and feeling the thrill of bravery that the girl had demonstrated. Her story was no longer just an account of survival, it had become a moral and mystical guide, showing that fear could be faced and overcome, that challenges could be transformed into opportunities, and that inner strength could command respect even from forces once considered beyond human understanding. Festivals in the village began to reflect the lessons of her courage. Annual rituals, once focused solely on appeasing unseen forces or enforcing tradition, were subtly reshaped to honor bravery, quick thinking, and ingenuity. Young girls, in particular, found inspiration in her example. They practiced navigating challenging tasks, learning to trust their instincts, and understanding that respect and admiration could be earned through integrity and determination. The field, once avoided after dusk, became a place where courage was tested in safe and guided ways, allowing the next generation to learn the value of facing fear with calmness and clarity. The elders, who had long relied on authority and superstition to maintain control, began to incorporate her lessons into their teachings. They emphasized that true wisdom lay not in invoking fear, but in guiding with respect and encouraging growth. Villagers of all ages began to appreciate that bravery was not reckless or thoughtless. It was deliberate, informed by observation, and rooted in confidence and self-respect. The girl's example became a standard by which actions were measured, a reminder that courage and quick thinking could transform even the most daunting situations into opportunities for learning and growth. Her personal recognition extended beyond moral acknowledgement. She was given a place of honor in communal events, her insights sought during important decisions, and her presence respected by all. She became a symbol of the possibility that ordinary individuals, when guided by courage and wisdom, could achieve extraordinary outcomes. Her story also served as a warning to those who sought to intimidate or belittle others. Malice and superstition could be outmatched by integrity, intelligence, and the quiet strength of a resolute heart. By the evening, as the sun set over the field, the village felt transformed. Fear had been replaced by understanding, superstition by insight, and doubt by respect. The girl had not only faced the unknown and emerged victorious but had also taught her community to value courage, wisdom, and integrity above all else. Her legacy was already taking root in the hearts and minds of the villagers, particularly the young girls, who now saw a path forward where bravery and quick thinking could lead to recognition, growth, and admiration. She had turned a night of challenge into a lifetime of inspiration, forever changing the culture and beliefs of her village. In the days following the vigil, the village buzzed with a quiet but palpable shift in attitude. Those who had doubted the girl's courage, those who had whispered behind her back, and even the rivals who had hoped she would fail, could no longer ignore the truth. They had watched her navigate the field of scarecrows with poise, intelligence, and extraordinary presence, and the missing scarecrow now stood as a silent testament to her abilities. The realization settled over them gradually, like the slow warming of the morning sun. Their fear, malice, and attempts to undermine her had been misguided, ineffective, and in some ways insignificant. The rivals, once bold in their criticism and attempts to intimidate her, now approached with hesitancy. Their earlier confidence had given way to uncertainty, and they found themselves unsure how to act in the presence of someone whose courage and skill had proven superior. Some avoided her entirely, humbled by the quiet power she radiated. Others approached cautiously, seeking understanding rather than confrontation, their envy tempered by recognition of her extraordinary resilience. The girl, however, treated them not with scorn or vengeance, but with calm wisdom. Her demeanor conveyed a subtle but powerful lesson. Courage and integrity were far greater tools than malice or deception. Even villagers who had not directly opposed her began to reflect on their assumptions. Parents who had feared the field, elders who had clung to superstition, and neighbors who had doubted her judgment all came to see that her actions were not merely a personal triumph, but a demonstration of principles they could respect and emulate. They recognized that the fear and rigid adherence to tradition they had long relied upon could no longer dictate outcomes. Instead, careful thought, bravery, and moral integrity held the true power. The girls' vigil had reshaped the community's perception, showing that courage was not reckless defiance, but deliberate, informed action rooted in self-respect and understanding. Her wisdom became evident in small, subtle ways. When rivals or villagers expressed doubt or regret, she listened without judgment, offering gentle guidance or examples drawn from her own experience. She emphasized learning over punishment, growth over fear, and understanding over superstition. In doing so, she further solidified the community's respect, not merely for her bravery in the field, but for her character and the strength of her judgment. Her example created a quiet revolution. Respect and admiration replaced fear, and the social fabric of the village began to shift toward a culture that valued integrity, courage, and thoughtfulness. By the end of the week, it was clear that the girl had achieved more than a personal victory. She had transformed the perceptions of those around her, dismantling old prejudices and superstitions, and replacing them with acknowledgement, respect, and understanding. The rival's humility, the villager's reverence, and the elder's reflection all testified to the profound impact of her courage and wisdom. In facing the unknown, she had taught her entire community that true strength lies not in fear or control, but in bravery, integrity, and the quiet power of a resolute heart. Years passed, and the story of the girl who had faced the field of scarecrows became more than just a tale. It transformed into a living legend that traveled through generations. Parents recounted her bravery to their children, emphasizing the courage, intelligence, and integrity she had displayed when confronted with fear and superstition. The missing scarecrow, once a symbol of mystery and uncertainty, became inseparable from her story, representing the triumph of calm, clever determination over the unknown. Every retelling carried the lesson that courage could illuminate even the darkest corners of fear and superstition, and that integrity and wisdom would always outshine malice or intimidation. The village itself began to honor her legacy in tangible ways. Annual festivals, once focused on appeasing the supernatural or demonstrating adherence to old traditions, incorporated new rituals celebrating bravery and resourcefulness. Children were encouraged to emulate the Scarecrow girl's courage through games and challenges designed to foster quick thinking, careful observation, and respect for the forces around them. Elders shared her story in council meetings and at communal gatherings, framing her actions as a moral guide for the entire community. Mothers whispered her name to their daughters when teaching them about resilience, and fathers reminded their sons of the importance of courage, honor, and respect for both the visible and unseen worlds. The missing scarecrow itself became a symbol within the village. Its disappearance and connection to the girl's bravery were recounted with reverence, reminding everyone that extraordinary events often have meaning beyond immediate understanding. Villagers speculated and wondered, with awe, how she had navigated the night unscathed and commanded the subtle energies of the scarecrows. The story inspired artists and storytellers, who painted murals, composed songs and created plays that illustrated the vigil, the missing scarecrow and her remarkable composure. Each rendition emphasized the same timeless message: courage transforms fear, intelligence guides action and integrity triumphs over intimidation. As generations passed, her tale became a rite of passage. Young girls were told the story before taking part in local festivals, dances or community challenges. Her example served as both inspiration and instruction: to act bravely in the face of uncertainty, to trust one's instincts, and to respect the hidden powers that shaped their world. Even boys and young men learned the same lessons, recognizing that true strength came not from dominance or fear, but from composure, intelligence and moral courage. The village, once bound tightly by superstition and dread, began to embrace a culture that celebrated bravery, observation and wisdom, a direct result of the Scarecrow girl's night in the field. Elders who had once doubted her and rivals who had plotted against her, came to tell her story with humility and reverence. They acknowledged that her courage had not only changed her own destiny but had reshaped the village's values and beliefs. The girl herself, now grown, continued to embody the lessons she had demonstrated. She walked among the villagers with quiet authority, always ready to advise, encourage, or simply serve as a living reminder of the power of bravery, integrity, and intellect. In the end, her legacy endured not only in the memory of her deeds but also in the village's transformed heart. The scarecrows, the field, and the night of her vigil became intertwined with lessons, celebrations, and inspiration. She was remembered as the girl who faced fear and emerged victorious, the girl whose courage awakened a community, and the girl whose story would inspire generations to act boldly, wisely, and with unshakable integrity. The legend of the Scarecrow girl became eternal, a beacon of hope and a testament to the extraordinary power of a fearless heart.